Hey guys, Timeline here. Today I want to go through 24 holes we did a few days ago, and what I want to mostly talk about is going to be utility and CD usage from my point of view and what is actually going through my head. So the first pool is a very big scary pool with inspiring, so we just CC one of the Houndmasters and then pull everything into the shard. And going into this pool, there are a few things I have in my head. I want to first do good DPS, so Consecration, Ashen, Light's Hammer and so on. And then I'm also looking at the Obliterators, and I want to stop as many casts as possible with Blinding Light. So I actually made a mistake, I didn't use Light's Hammer for like 10 seconds. The pool was basically dead. But if you're going to be paying attention, the Obliterators are going to cast the curse soon, and I'm just stop both of them with Blinding Light. And this doesn't seem like much, but when you go into hierarchies, I just saved 2 people 1 global cooldown during all their CDs, and this adds up. And also, if this was fortified, I would recommend holding your Holy Avenger for the second or even third trash instead of using it on the first one, as you actually need it for healing. Whereas I didn't need it for healing, and I was able to just use it for DPS and spamming it with Shield of the Righteous. Then we just finished this mob, and I'm already kind of mentally preparing for the next pool, which is going to be a big pool before the shard, and then shard into the fire guy. So in the next pool, I know that I have no CDs, and it's going to be just like wings for a tiny bit. And one thing I still need to do with my UI is I need to get a good way to track frontos and stuff similar to that, where I would have different raid frames, nameplate covers. Again, Houndmaster, as you know, at 50% he casts Loyal Beast, so I'm just looking around and being ready to stun it. So I put it on focus, and when he starts Loyal Beast, I instantly stun it, so the tank doesn't have to kite that much. And then we just try to kind of separate it from the rest of the pack so we can kick it and focus it down. Because if the bots are just spam casting on the tank and we can't do any CC, it starts to get really messy for the tank. I'm going to be holding my second wings for the shard pool, so I can kind of deal with it, and it's also going to be a good pool to Consecration and stuff like that, so I'm not using it on cooldown, because I know that I'm not going to need to Ashen in exactly 2 minutes from now, as my next Ashen is on the next shard, on the third shard, so I'm not scared about not having it. So it's fine that I used wings like 20 seconds late. Again, same thing, I'm kind of paying attention to the Obliterators to see if I can use my Blinding Light to stop any of the casts. And other than that, it's just DPSing. And also, make sure you have some sound cue or something for Siphon Life from the Depraved Collectors. Because if you dispel the blue dot, I'm not sure how it's called right now, you can instantly dispel it and it does like 0 damage. So if you're going to see, when I see it start casting Siphon Life, I'm going to try to dispel it as soon as possible. So as you can, if you rewind, the mage took 0 damage from the dot whatsoever. And so that's why it's really important to use sound cues to track different dots and debuffs. Now I am probably free to use, I maybe should have used Holy Avenger on the next pool. I don't remember if I actually did, because I believe I would have gotten it back for the fire guy. But yeah, now we have a big pool with the Houndmaster, the Smallies, and these 2 Obliterators and Darkblade. The main thing on these pools is I would recommend just mostly paying attention to the tank so you don't get hit by any frontos, because at the higher level it's just going to one-shot you. So always pay attention to the tank and try to stay behind the mobs. I also put my focus on accidentally on the Monk, so when I was trying to stun the Houndmaster from jumping into the group, it actually didn't work out. So now we are just kind of focusing the casters because they have less HP than the Houndmaster, so we figured it would be faster than simply trying to focus down the inspiring if the other mobs are pretty much dead already. Now, this is also a mistake I did. I was not focusing the Gargons where I should have definitely been focusing them, because by nature they have like 20% or 30% more HP. So it was a mistake on my end to not focus the priority target. This pool is the same thing. I'm going to be paying attention to the Houndmasters. I mean, to the Obliterators. So I can see if I can maybe stop any of the curses. So my teammates don't have to kick them, so they can just focus on DPSing. And again, pay attention to the collectors and how I'm trying to dispel as soon as possible, so the dot gets at most 1 or 2 debuffs. I didn't want to Ashen too early on this pool, because I wanted to make sure I have some of it for the Incinerator, because on the 24 it kind of starts to hurt, so I didn't want to just do the Ashen purely for damage, but instead hold it a bit, so I get some value from the healing as well, for at least the few seconds. So now I'm kind of hoping for Wing procs, doing some utility to help minimize the damage, because the tank is getting hit pretty hard. And the only thing I have is like Sack and Bubble. Super useful if you're playing Paladin. Always try, if you use your Sack, almost always try to have either Divine Protection or a Divine Shield with it, so you can use it to mitigate some of the damage. Because on the one hand, Sack is great, but on the other, it hurts a lot if there's some damage coming to you as well. With the debuff, with the Flame debuff, you always want to dispel one of them as soon as it goes out. So make sure you are tracking who gets the debuff, so you can dispel it as soon as possible. Next pool, we are going to be going right into boss with one of the packs, I believe. So the main idea there is to just be careful with frontals, to make sure that we don't like instantly flop, as on Tyrannical, like you just get one shot. So yeah, we take 2 Stormborns. If you spam the button, you can take 2 at once, or even 3 at once. And then we just go into the boss, pull it, and I'm going to hold Avenger to try and fish for some wings. And then also going to use wings for some AoE damage at both at once. So just some Shield of the Righteous spam. And yeah, just mostly paying attention to make sure I never am in front of the boss. So only time I go in front of the boss is just trying to reapply my Consecration on the ground to optimize the placement of it. But other than that, I'm trying to stay at all costs behind the boss. On Tyrannical, it's pretty painful how long this boss takes, but I would argue Halls is probably my favorite dungeon because of how easy overall it is, where the only hard part of Halls is if it's fortified and you have to do the shards, but with the most routes, like with this route, I would have Ashen for 2 out of the 3 shards. So this dungeon is one of the easier dungeons for healers compared to like Sanguine Depths or even the other side or Theater, where almost all the pressure is on the healer, because all the bosses are just pumping insane DPS into the group, like Kulfarak for example. But yeah, so when we are doing this boss, I can maybe talk a bit about rotation or like priority casts. I'm always trying to first Consecration, then like Hammer of Wrath, Judgment, Holy Shock, and Crusader Strike last. And I'm using Shield of Righteous only if I would be overcapping and I don't have the free GCD. So let's say I'm at 5 Holy Power and I have Hammer of Wrath ready. Then I would use Shield of Righteous even on single target, so I can start casting my... So I can use the Hammer of Wrath and I don't have to wait 1 second. Because doing Wings on single target, casting Hammer of Wrath on off cooldown is the most important thing. I also think I made a mistake. I probably should have used Ashen here, So then I get like one more action, and I think I underestimated how long this boss would take. And if I didn't use Ashen, then I should have used at least Wings. But this was just a huge underestimation from how long this boss would take. Because if I would use Wings, I would still get them for the second boss, and the idea of holding Ashen was to get it on pool on second boss. So not using Wings here is just simply trolling from me. And maybe even IQD, as I think I would have 3 minutes left. Because we still have one decently big pool after this. Yeah, this is where it gets fun. I was not paying attention, the tank leaped, and I maybe could have even saved it if I used the health potion instantly. But I just wasn't paying attention and I died, so that was on me. Just gonna skip it now. 30 seconds. We released. We skipped the first guy and we skipped Sogodon. And now we do a big pool with the Gargon. On this pool, again, nothing too scary. Just take the Gargon and then mostly try to stop the obliterators with like stuns, blinding light, any sort of CC, so they are not spam casting the tank, as that's probably the hardest part of the whole dungeon. And I just make sure to avoid Frontos. This is something in Season 1 I was dying to Frontos almost all the time, and what helped me is just like being very focused and conscious when fighting any of the Fronto guys, so you don't get hit by them. It's simple as that, really. We finish this and then we invest potion. And what I also figured later on is if you click on these two changing slashers, they have a buff. I don't have it on my UI, so I need to enable that. But they have a buff of how soon they are going to be enabled or disabled. And if you know this, then you can like play around with pulling the Stoneborn. I have targeted. But because I'm not tracking that on my UI, that actually was not available for me. On this boss, I just Ashen on pool with Last, Wings. And maybe I could have even used Holy Avenger, because this boss is not that scary. So just use it for damage. But in the end I decided to hold it as we had like super fine time. And just for safety. So at this point it was like I didn't need to be super greedy with like maximizing damage, as all that was needed. Also decided to use Bubble, so I can do some bit more damage with doing Ashen. As I didn't get dispelled, as we have only one curse dispel, I believe. Not sure if Priest can curse dispel. But yeah, this boss is pretty simple. As a Paladin, your 3 ways to dodge this is either Bubble, then you can use Horse, or the last option is you can use Door of Shadows, which I'm going to be using at one point. And one thing I learned with Door of Shadows is you should be using Door of Shadows to the wall, so you also bait the Blood Torrent later on. We also got some super scuffed timings where we got the leap like super early, and I actually never seen it happen, so that was kinda weird. But in the end, didn't matter too much. So again, trying to optimize my damage, trying to use as many Holy Shocks on the boss when I don't need to heal the tank. And yeah, this one I have Horse for, so when it's like 2 seconds I'm going to Horse and start running. Super simple. And on lower keys this probably doesn't even one-shot you on Tyrannical, so other options become also like using Divine Protection or a Mastery for a single target. That's one thing I almost no Paladins do, is you should be using Aura Mastery sometimes on single target, if you know that there's no damage to be taken. So this is the Door of Shadows I was talking about. I should have used this Door of Shadows to the wall, as then I would bait this Blood Torrent to the wall, and it would not be in the middle. Using second Wings, and then going to be so I can use them in 2 minutes again. But in the end I decided to hold them, because we had too much CDs for the big pool. On this boss, sometimes you can use if you can see, which you should definitely make a UI to be able to do that, is you want to be able to see who has aggro on the Stone Fiends, and if you see that someone is about to get like blasted from the boats, you can hand off protection them so they lose aggro and they redirect to the tank or somebody else. But then also keep in mind, you are not going to have Blessing of Protection for the bleed guy, or if your tank wants to do a double pull, you won't be able to Blessing of Protection him, so it's going to be a lot harder for him. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now just focusing the boss, trying to CC them and going to clear them down a bit. I don't have any defensive, so this is going to be a bit scary, so I'm just trying to top myself up at the last second. And then going to Consecration. And just try to heal up the group. And this should be the last one. We finish Echelon. And I probably should have started drinking a lot sooner. I started drinking a bit late, so I had to play this mini boss with like 20% mana. But as a Holy Paladin, it's super easy to deal with this mini boss, as you can bubble one, Blessing of Protection other, even sacrifice if needed. And then if you manage to Blessing of Protection yourself or a melee DPS with Taunt, they can also taunt the debuff from the tank. So he doesn't have to pop any CDs and can save them for the trash pool. You can see I even used Sag on him but in the end he managed to dodge it. Yeah, this was what even happened here. I think we spread for faking, and then yeah, this was funny. So I just decided to bubble. Mage luckily managed to auto time, so then I'm just going to give him some attention so he doesn't bleed out completely to the dot. But as you can see, my mana is not looking too great. So this time we learned, but I'm just dead on this at this point. So I kind of just embrace my death. This can be prevented if you just pull Varuf at the right time, so you never get this overlap. Because if you pull him at the bad time, you are pretty much guaranteed to get this overlap of Wave of Terror and Quaking every single time. Same thing with doing Quaking and Sogodon. I'm not sure what the timing is, but there's a very good, there's a specific timing where if you pull him at that time, you're going to have good timing, so you can spread for Quaking and then stag for the debuff. I should have taken, Champion's Brand in this case, because those bosses don't take almost any healing, so I'm not worried about going But if it was like some other dungeon, or if this mini boss would have been a lot sooner, I would have taken the mana power. But in this case I know that I won't need it. Because it's inspiring, I decided to hold my Ashen and I decided to use it on boss, so you can pull one of the inspiring into the boss. And again, I should have used my Light's Hammer a lot earlier. You can see I'm holding it like 10 seconds. And those small seconds just add up. Also using Holy Avenger to try and fish for wings, and single target Aura Mastery for the tank, and then just spamming Shield Righteous. But I missed like 2 or 3 seconds of Consecration, so that was kind of a huge waste. So at this point we are kind of like memeing with the group, but I just told them, kill the bad and we can put this into boss, because I don't think a 24 host is going to one-shot us. So I can just Ashen it and I would heal the AoE cast that we won't be able to kick. But I think that was fine, and in the end ended up working just fine. Also, I didn't reapply my second beacon for like, I think the rest of the dungeon. So that was pretty weird. I guess I just need to make the Vikora a lot bigger. Also decided to take those 2 Stoneborns at the top of the stairs to get a bit more uptime. But I just playing this Collector into the boss, so we can save some time. And as you can see, the bolts do almost 0 damage, and I think we would have been able to do this pull even on like a 27-28, and we would have still lived just fine. Again, this boss, yeah, horse is super chill, just love it as a healer. There's so little to heal. You can just pump some big damage and take a time off from having to heal some scarier dungeons. On this boss, I don't think there's too much to say. I'm probably just going to skip it. It's really not much going on. Just dodge the circles and yeah, bait the fixations into the lanterns. Oh, how did we die? Oh yeah, I think we missed the kick and we just all flopped. Yeah, we didn't have a kick. That happened. I forgot about that. So we just take the rest. Again, nothing happening here. Gonna rest the priest and we go into the next room. In the next room, try to always go where the least people are. So if you see that the monk or someone like with big CDs is going to be going like top left, don't go top left. You just want to be, otherwise your damage is going to be like wasted. So I'm just trying to kind of single target down these 3 mobs and going to make sure I'm in range of everyone else so I can just heal them. Also saw that the mage was asking for Blessing of Protection because he had aggro, so I just gave him that because I knew that there is nothing else in the dungeon that I would need to Blessing of Protection in the next few minutes. Well, basically until the end of the dungeon. Although I did learn that you can actually Blessing of Protection the statues. So if you are not able to dodge because you don't have any movement CDs, or you can't dodge it for whatever reason, you can Blessing of Protection yourself and you won't take damage from the statue as it's physical. On Cigar, kind of just focusing, we probably could have done a better job of doing more prior target to optimize the damage into Cigar to save some time, but in the end ended up working out just fine. Again, saving my Wings and Ashen, and because you have good time, I'm also going to ask the group to wait a bit so I can drink, but this whole part I can skip, and probably even once more. So yeah, I just drank a bit, also eaten to get my buff. And this boss, I would recommend usually soaking at least 1 or 2. You can soak either 1 or both intermissions. If it's a hierarchy, I would recommend soaking only 1 of the intermissions with bubble. But if it's a lower key, if it's like anything below 20, I would recommend soaking both, simply so you don't have to rely on someone else doing the second one. So the first one you can do with bubble, and you're going to see me. You always want to bubble a bit later because the soaking phase lasts like 10 to even 15 seconds depending on bad RNG. So you're going to see I'm going to try to heal myself as much as possible and then bubble at the very last second to maximize the duration of it so I don't get any unnecessary damage. And I'm prepared for this whole part. With this dot on the tank, you want to make sure that the dot basically stacks up the longer it lasts. So if you don't want to be using any defensive, so like Blessing of Sacrifice, you want to use it as late as possible and not the second it spawns. Priest might die, so I just use Dot of Shadows and rest him fast. The tank is probably going to proc cheat because of the dot and I'm not in range. And you can see the Sec is tanking me so hard because I didn't use Divine Protection before using Sacrifice. And that was what I mentioned earlier. And I think I also died, yep. I find like I sometimes just brain freeze on this boss. And I need to get some Decora or just pay better attention to where the statue is aiming at, so I can actually dodge it. I think there is some miscommunication on this part, and we actually ended up 3 people soaking 4 of the lasers, so I had to heal extra hard, but luckily I had Wings and Holy Avenger. I also used Aura Mastery, and just tried to kind of out-heal it, and put the second beacon on myself. But it was kinda close, and if I got bad RNG, we could have easily died. And yeah, so you can see how hard this dot hits. Yeah, and also remember that you can always freedom the first guy debuff on. You can freedom the first guy debuff. We also lose the monk. This boss was just like we already knew this was kind of timed, so we just started goofing around a bit and just having a bit too much fun. Like I'm even taunt like the mini boss at the last second. But yeah, hopefully you found this useful, and if you did and you would like to see more commentaries, make sure to let me know down in the comments below, and see you in the next one. We just kill it, there's nothing too much to be said, and yep, see you guys, cheers.